for you. So I have a section here called Coronavirus. How exposed is your job? So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say the job, and then I'm going to ask both you, Dr. Jeff, and Brian, what's your take? I know, Dr. Jeff, you're going to give it to me from a medical, and Brian, you can give it to me too, your opinion on this, because you've seen industry, you've seen it all. We know about this virus. We know that it's spread, how it's spread. We know how contagious it is. Certain jobs certainly have higher risk and other jobs don't. So here we go. I'm going to lay it out there. So first statement, here it is for you, Dr. Jeff. How exposed is my job? I am an assembly line worker. Am I at risk for COVID-19?
I would say yes, depending on your workstation, because in an assembly, you're assembling things, which means that there's probably someone to your right and someone to your left that if they're infected and they're in your 6 feet zone, there is a potential that you could have some infection there.
All right, there we go.
Yes.
Here we go, Brian. I like this one. I am a member of the clergy. Do I have risk?
Lots of risk. So I think the clergy has proven to be a place where there are hotspots because of just the nature that how most churches or synagogues or temples are set up. People come, they sing, which projects the virus a little bit further than normal. Lots of the rituals in church involving close proximity to people or your temple and so I think the question then becomes is, how can we rethink about worship and what that means? How do you have a great worship service and experience yet in a very safe environment? As we know, many of the ministers have challenged state laws because they really go back to that place where they're most comfortable and they most enjoy, and their congregation enjoys it. But to a certain degree, the virus is the virus. The virus doesn't really care about your religion all that much, and so it doesn't really care. So I think that profession is one where, as if you're the church leader or the temple leader, you just have to really think about how to make it safe. And I think there is a way to do that, but it's going to differ by what's the design of the church, all those types of things we just talked about that we talked about in corporations actually apply to places of worship as well.
Excellent. Here we go. How exposed is my job? All right, here we go, Dr. Jeff. I am I'm in the beauty industry. So I'm going to say beauticians and related occupations, hairdressers and barbers. How exposed am I?
There is a potential for exposure there. Again, you're working in close proximity to your client. Again, wearing masks. Obviously, putting a plexiglass in that situation is not going to probably be that helpful because you have to have hands-on with that client, working around their face, their hair, barbers and that. So again, masking to help protect each other, doing screening before people are coming in. Again, hand washing, sanitizer, cleaning the area after the client is done so it's a fresh start to the next client, yes. But
yeah, and I would piggyback on, certainly there was a couple cases out of Missouri at a beauty salon where the beauticians actually had exposure, had symptoms, tested positive, and certainly potentially exposed over 100 people. And even what Brian was saying earlier about the clergy, yes, there was certainly a case of a choir practice out on the East Coast, and they were singing at the top of their lungs, and even though they were physically distanced, those particles were airborne and certainly inhaled. Here we go. Brian, I like this one. I am a construction worker, roofer, tiler, or carpenter. Do I have risk?
Depends. That one's a little different because number one, if you're outdoors, primarily for your job, typically you have a little bit less exposure just simply because assuming you got a breeze and those kinds of things. However, though, again, if you're working close in proximity to somebody, even if you're outdoors, the risk is still there. It may not be the same as sitting next to a person indoors side by side, but there's still a heavy risk if your job takes you in proximity of other people. Then also there's the issue, again, of making sure your equipment is cleaned and wiped down, that you're not sharing parts with others. So all those things apply. Can you, I would say effectively eliminate the risk in a construction business? Probably not, but can you make it manageable? I think so. So it's, again, up on all of us working together to try to find a safe way to be able to actually continue that work.
Excellent. Let's do a few more of these. I like this. Here we go, Dr. Jeff. I like this one. I am a farmer or a farm worker. Is there risk?
Again, unfortunately, there is risk. They have a tendency to work closely, either working in the fields or in the crops. Many times these employees commute together. So they ride to and from work. They may also live together during harvest season. Additionally, they may drive to different locations to do the harvesting and working together. So there is risk. And there's things that, again, employers can help do and employees can help do to protect themselves by cohorting people. So in other words, if I live with 4 workers, I would probably want to ride to work with those 4 workers because I already live with them and my exposure is already with them, and not put me in another truck with someone else, and now I potentially have exposure to those people or myself. So there's ways around this, but they do potentially have risk. Yes.
All right, excellent. We're going to do one more of these. I got to give my shout out to librarians. This is for you, Brian. I am a librarian. Do I have risk?
Well, it depends if it's the librarians that were around when I was a kid, and they weren't that helpful, so at least not to me. But no, they actually do, though, right? Because again, it's what's their job, right? People come and ask them questions. Are the people that come into the library protected? Do they have on masks? Does the librarian have on a mask? Are they making sure that the books and things that they touch that are reasonably sanitized? It's again, I think the challenge on a lot of these professions is that there's some level of risk in virtually every profession that we know of, right? The question becomes is, how do we actually think about those risks, do a reasonable assessment, and then be able to figure out how do I make sure I make the workplace, the safest it possibly can be, and continue on. So I think we can learn to go back to work effectively, but it's going to be different. It won't be like it was. Some of the changes, like any sort of major pandemic or any other change, will wind up being relatively permanent. Some will go back to the way it was before. I think companies will look at the risk of infection very differently, in the future than they have in the past. I think that actually is a good thing.
Excellent. I'm going to do a bonus for me. I am in sports. Professional sports or collegiate sports. Am I at risk? The answer is yes, and I'm actually going to be doing a COVID and sports show in 2 weeks. That's a teaser for 2 weeks from tonight. Here we go. All right, guys. So I want to get into a second.